Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Carmine's Arena, a cultural gourmet of information, if you will, a feast for your mind and soul. And now, without further delay, the man, the myth, the maestro, Carmine Arena.
Greetings, my friends, and welcome to Carmine's Arena, site of contest and conflict, venue for and of resolution. Resolution in terms of focus, remedy, and commitment, both yours and mine, to the preservation, the propagation, and indeed the celebration of Western civilization. Motivating youngsters, say, to the glories of math requires that we humanize mathematicians by storytelling. Few ever tire of being read to. In fact, many nostalgically revisit those days when they sat mesmerized by a gifted teacher who would bring the written word to life, as math brings to life the magic of numbers and all that math outnumbers. Humanizing genius is a must in all fields of learning, for to do otherwise is to make genius remote, whereas it might better be made anecdote to promote the proper antidote to a listener's bloat of inferiority and self-pity. How better to humanize genius than to recall that none other than Einstein did not do well in school, or to reference Pascal, who got one of his greatest discoveries because of a toothache, or Newton, thanks to a school bully, or Descartes, a housefly. The anecdotes are endlessly better than mere footnotes, as if in that's all she wrote. Thus, school terms should not be long prison sentences, but condensed to motivating horse sense, not penitence in essence. The sacred ambition of all who teach is to communicate how important it is to get out of one's way, to find the courage and still the fear, and rear the mainstay to our workadays. To motivate is to checkmate all that's second-rate, and to propagate and promulgate all that pulsates and oscillates, scintillates unto innovates, and not solely for the mere sake of newness alone, but for the stakes placed on wide awake. As mentioned earlier, and I repeat for emphasis, an antidote or an anecdote is forever better than a footnote. As an example, this anecdote was sent to me by a loyal and thoughtful listener who recognized that all too many of today's teachers are not motivators of thought, but out-and-out propagandists skilled to distort for their biased comfort. Listen, a teacher asked her sixth grade class how many of them were Obama fans. Not really knowing what an Obama fan is, but wanting to be liked by the teacher. All the kids raised their hands except for little Johnny. The teacher asked Johnny why he has decided to be different again. Little Johnny responded, "Because I'm not an Obama fan." The teacher in turn asked, "Why aren't you a fan of Obama?" Johnny said, "Because I'm a Republican." The teacher quickly asked Johnny why he's a Republican. Little Johnny answered, "Well, my mom's a Republican, and my dad's a Republican, so I'm a Republican." Annoyed by this answer, the teacher asked If your mom were a moron and your dad an idiot, what would that make you? With a big smile, little Johnny replied, that would make me an Obama fan. You see, my dear listeners, there is hope after all. Not the hope Obama sponsored, which requires a telescope, but a young mind's use of a microscope, which immediately finds the use for soap. Soap on a rope to clean away germ-ridden socialism's interloping dirty grope. A more recent case in point is Venezuela and its president, Maduro. A fist-shaking throwback who tells his people, a starving populace, to prep for war with the United States. As such, the mouse that roars hopes that fervently after an American victory, America will do what it customarily does, and that is to pour money into the empty coffers and pockets of the rodent enemy, their own money up a chimney. Yes, we never occupy, we just subsidize. Though never thanked, we're just point blank the former enemy's savings bank. Socialism once again resuscitated at the fount of capitalism, there to be quenched unto repetitions and ad infinitum for wampum mullah from Z back to Alpha. It has always, from time immemorial, baffled and amazed me that Americans are duped and scooped up by socialism. For socialism is, after all, a system based on force, a force willing to perpetrate the foulest atrocities. 40 to 70 millions killed in Mao's China, 20 million in Stalin's Russia, 40 million in all under other USSR leaders. Then there is Cambodia, North Korea, Yugoslavia, Ethiopia, Indonesia, and Rwanda, where uncounted millions more have been erased with little trace, much to the world's disgrace. Socialism breeds death, and where it's called progressive, a misnomer if there ever was one, it breeds mediocrity, mendacity, and viral misery. Excuse me. And viral misery, unanimously, for its patronage, requires pillage. Capitalism, on the other hand, inspires, impels, drives, and prompts exceptionalism, stimulates charity, encourages philanthropy, and excites invention. Socialism is the practice of societal stupidity, which, unlike nature, does not abhor a vacuum. Nonetheless, when enlightenment strikes and breaks the vacuum, the thunder rattles reason awake. Reason to at least address the elementary, if not the elemental. Interestingly, the English language can be said to abhor a vacuum, for unlike its Latin derivative, the word vacuum in English requires two of the letter U, as if to squeeze away emptiness, otherwise occupied by, you guessed it, a vacuum. I've pointed out on a previous episode the many epithets all cultures reserve to cast at their native-born morons, imbeciles, and idiots. Terms of abuse more likely inspired not by the clinically disabled, but the dorks, slow-witted, and socially inept, yet clever enough wanting to be kept in perpetuity as someone's pet. You know the type, I'm sure. The pets are America's budget. Its emptied wallets, its entitlement checks in the monthly mail. Socialism's kismets, which secretly depends on capitalism's stock market profits and for its cozy warm blankets and sublets in a lovelock. Even if you pretend to be stupid long enough, the bluff develops handcuffs. Italians have a perfect sounding word for this dumb stock. That word is cafone, meaning a crude, dumb slob, society's stumbling block to mock. Cavone found its merry way into the English language and deftly describes many a politico and their supporters, the likes of New York City's newly re-elected mayor de Blasio, whose portfolio sadly lacks punctilio, took his mother's surname because he's a fractured filio. He's the champion of the perpetually shiftless and sleepy homeless, listless. New York become a squeegee land again for opioid-thinking spheroids. Thanks to Mayor Celluloid, rabidly supported by these voting blocks of anthropoids, those tabloid copy boys, for tabloids don't have news, they have a narrative. They, that is, the said tabloids, just buzz about naught but scuzz, to nuzzle, and even guzzle. It's so common, it's no longer a puzzle to ponder both either here or the blue yonder as we continue to wander whilst the truth squander as the electorate becomes a scam and jam of lying bounders of sham. Socialism is, in my less than humble opinion, it reveals a lack of ambition and quite possibly the experience of having been poorly parented. Thus, the government is seen as a mom and daddy in fill-in for filial, a government we can admonish from our high chair. Therefore, I don't want to grow up is nanny state socialism theme and dream song age-long. For 70 years, the USSR presided over bitter failure until it lost the Cold War. Look about, and one sees the failure of Cuba in dysfunction, its endless injunctions and historic presumptions, which invites capitalist vivisection unto divinely just malediction. Yes, Cuba's misery is ongoing. Now, with Venezuela to marvel at, you see why my critique and pratique lend me a mystique I don't share with folksy delectation, but instead to invite pedigreed deliberation. Those who repeat failure when each time expecting a different outcome are nitwits in search of Oz, and all that jazz sans any thoughtful pizzazz, merely jeremiads that loudly lists the woes and codes of, say, old Alcatraz squeal a la mode. Just think of our newly re-elected mayor of New York City, who jetted to Germany to join the G20 socialist protesters, where 160 cops were injured. And at the same time, de Blasio deserted New York and skipped the tribute to a black female cop who was killed in the line of duty. As mayor of the city that never sleeps, he's a shameless, aimless imposter who mirrors endless error above all predecessors, whose New York splendor he's reduced to socialist squatting and stupor as its felonious abettor. Talk of a Cavone who was nothing like his scholarly father of Germanic descent. Lord knows what Dad underwent between mother and son in alignment. As I have advised in the past, the annual meeting of the G20 could avoid the anti-capitalist protests and upheavals, the looting and the fires simply meeting by prearrangement at sea on a comfortable vessel. It would leave the de Blasio mob of hobnobs less blasé and all wet as they plummet to catch sight of said vessel far offshore, to be plagued nevermore, as meetings would be held by the score. G20 meetings, allow me to remind you, bringing together the world's largest advanced and emerging economies, representing 2/3 of the world's population, 85% of its global domestic product, and over 75% of global trade. So much for looters and their stay-at-home rooters. Now listen, children, and you shall hear about two people who we should all revere. Hannah Arendt, born in 1908, died in 1975. She was a German-born American political theorist, frequently quoted, who wrote 18 books and numerous articles, ranging from works on totalitarianism to thinking and judging, who greatly influences political philosophy to this day. The second person we should revere is alive and kicking. He is Milo Yiannopoulos, a rarity of wisdom, a homosexual conservative out of the political closet. Milo quotes the aforementioned Hannah Arendt, who observed, and I quote, "The aim of a totalitarian education has never been to instill convictions, but to destroy the capacity to form any." Milo quotes this passage in his new book called Dangerous. It is impossible to put down. For all Mr. Yiannopoulos' fey limp-wristed, he's an incredibly strong, brave man. There are all too few political figures who would have displayed the kind and degree of courage that Milo has regularly shown on the field of battle against tyranny. I, for one, shall never understand why left-wing types must hate another's differing opinion, unless it's tactical as opposed to honestly intellectual. Attack is their only defense, and habitual offensiveness. As Americans, it makes one heartsick to witness left-wing deceptiveness. In short, it's un-American and alien, overweened and obscene. The American dream gone from sunbeam to smokescreen, losing self-esteem, its ready promise in this age gone unredeemed. Excuse me, my allergy, as you well know. The left's moral indictments, their shabby way to blaspheme, these carping critics bundled into packaging labeled sexist, racist, ageist, capitalist, antagonist, and ritualist, whereas the only rituals are designed by cultists of left-wing stripe, gripe, and, oh yes, tripe. Again, I repeat, read Milo Yiannopoulos' book, Dangerous. It's a page-turner. Being gifted, gay, gutsy, and conservative requires adjectives yet to become a priori motivators. For the gentleman has ego enough to upset the left's status quo, its postures, and its echoes. Would that other conservatives reveal what lay behind the masks of political correctness and passive acceptance I call cowardice. Coming clean befits the American dream. It's what made America supreme. For people like conservative Milo are not all insincere as queer, nor the same pioneer cloned for reasons to domineer and engineer. So to steer volunteers to not merely cheer, but to sneer and proudly become America's shameless mutineers. On the other hand, Milo has in mind a far worthier career. Yes, to err is human, to blunder, however, naught but stupidity in haste. One size does not fit all. We conservatives know this and are pleased. Our road sign reads, "Keep to the right," whereas the exception is the liberal left running into oncoming traffic, ne'er to arrive safe by broomstick set on Zoom to precincts, Bolshevik and such like rural sticks, for doomed. Educated by a teacher who well knew the soiliness of brats, here's one such teacher. A retired sergeant in the Marine Corps took a new job as a school teacher, but one must remember that always a Marine, once a Marine. Just before the school year started, he hurt his back and was required to wear a plaster cast around the upper part of his body. Fortunately, the cast fit under his shirt and was not noticeable. On the first day of school, he found himself assigned to the toughest students in the school. You know, the smart aleck punks, having already heard the new teacher is a Marine, were leery of him and knew he would be testing his discipline in this classroom. Well, walking confidently into the rowdy classroom, the new teacher opened the window and sat down at his desk. When a strong breeze made his tie flap, he picked up a stapler and stapled it to his chest. Dead silence. The rest of the year went smoothly, thanks be to holy motivation. I now close to remind you of little Johnny in the 6th grade, if only to remind you to remember that a child shall lead them when properly motivated and educated. I love that story about the Marine. And one should understand that sometimes to motivate, one must be deceptive. And until next time, my friends, when I grant conservative testimony in harmony, unlike the customary left-wing cacophony, I say to you, ciao, amici.
If you have any comments or other remarks, and that I perhaps could even read on some of these broadcasts, please do not hesitate to write to me, Carmine Arena, P.O. Box 1029, Larchmont, New York 10538.